And we even have an update just in the last few minutes from the president himself, Michael.
Yeah, it's a little bizarre. He tweeted out that he has asked China to provide a plan to reduce their trade deficit with the United States over the course of the year by $1 billion. Well, they have a $35 billion trade deficit with the United States right now, a month into the year. So I'm not really sure what he means by that.
And in fact, you brought along a chart which shows graphically how much the deficit has sort of narrowed with China anyway.
Yeah, the trade deficit with China widened last year, but this year so far, it's just under $36 billion. They are by far our biggest trade deficit partner, but reducing it by $1 billion would be a drop in the bucket. I mean, they could do that very easily, but whether they would, that's another question. I don't think they want to be told what to do.
Michael, who's favorite to replace Cohn?
Nobody really knows. The names that immediately came to mind are Peter Navarro and Larry Kudlow, both very conservative, but very different views on trade. Navarro, the chief nativist in the White House, the man who wants trade wars, especially against China. Kudlow, as conservative as he is, very, very much a free trader. So it could be either one of those, or it could be somebody that we don't have any idea, who that person might be. Generally, they've been heavy hitters from Wall Street, or someone with a lot of background in economics at the National Economic Council, Larry Summers under Barack Obama. So maybe he reaches beyond that small circle for somebody that would reassure Wall Street.
Mike, as we were saying yesterday, the EU is ready to retaliate. We heard from the Trade Commissioner, Cecilia Malmstrom, earlier, and she said, I truly hope this won't happen. It seems unlikely it won't happen, doesn't it?
Well, at this point, yes. You sort of have to retaliate in these sorts of situations, but they'll do it under WTO rules. And what it means is they can retaliate up to the amount of money that, in theory, their economies are going to lose because of the steel and aluminum tariffs. For the European Union, the latest calculation from the Peterson Institute is about $2.2 billion. That's a very small amount overall for the U.S. economy, hardly noticeable, but it would hurt specific sectors, and they're obviously talking about things like bourbon from Kentucky and blue jeans
and peanut butter.
What they want to do is hit the economies of the districts represented by the congressional leaders who could put pressure on Trump.
Talk about surgical.
Not a massive thing for the U.S. economy, but surgically designed to create pain that would affect those leaders, and maybe they would go to the president and say, my district hates this.
There are precedents, as there always are. Bush had a 30% tariff, I should say, imposed on steel. What happened then, Michael?
Well, what we saw then was a very small hit to GDP, and most studies who've looked at it suggest that we lost more jobs than we gained. Gained some in the steel industry, lost some in downstream industries that use steel. There's dispute about the numbers because there are different numbers produced by people who have different stakes in the thing. But overall, a wash for the economy, but no benefit to the economy. And that's the general view of economists to these tariffs, is that while we might gain a few steel jobs, we'll lose some downstream because our industries will be less competitive, and therefore the tariffs don't do anything. George Bush put these tariffs on under a different provision of trade law, but he ended up taking them off because they weren't doing any good and we were losing in the WTO.
And we should mention that today we got the trade deficit numbers. It happened to widen.
Wider, yes, wider than forecast. And Donald Trump's problem is he's complaining about the trade deficits, but he's been president now for a little over a year, so he owns the issue. I mean, these are his trade deficits now, and so if he's going to do something about it, he's got to come up with a plan that would actually reduce them.